The following program is brought to you by the University of Alabama.
It would seem that writing fiction like The Prince of Tides and nonfiction such as My Reading Life, in which he declares his admiration for great books and dedicated teachers, would keep Pat Conroy plenty busy. But he has added another job, editor of the South Carolina Press series Story River Books, and chosen Katherine Clark's The Headmaster's Darlings as one of the first. The Headmaster's Darlings is the story of an extraordinary prep school teacher, Norman Laney, of the fictional Brookhaven School in Mountain Brook, Alabama. I spoke with Katherine Clark and Pat Conroy in our studio in the Digital Media Center on the campus of the University of Alabama. What a pleasure. Katherine Clark, Pat Conroy, nice to see you both. Pat, I saw you just briefly, hardly even to talk to, in April in Montgomery when you'd come over for the literary festival. Since then, I've heard the most outrageous rumor about you. Although it was well known that you were an athlete and a point guard at the Citadel, the rumor of late is that you have taken up physical fitness. This is your opportunity to scotch this rumor. What have you done?
All the people that are watching this on television need to do to scotch the rumor is look at my body. And no, what it was, Don, is about 3 years ago, I was in the hospital dying, and it did not appeal to me, and the doctor did not know if I was going to make it through the night. So during that long night of the soul, I decided I need to do something if I'm going to get better. So I hired a Japanese physical therapist who was also a torturer of American prisoners of war at one time in her life. And she has taken over me. Her English is good, but not that good. My Japanese does not exist. So she's been punishing my body for 3 years. And I go in, and I'm now going in 5 times a week. Oh. And we've actually opened a studio called Mina and Conroy's in Beaufort, South Carolina.
In Beaufort?
Yes.
Yeah. And you have an interest in this. You are a proprietary interest.
Yes, I am a proprietary interest. She says, Mr. Pat, you're my boss, but I will listen to nothing you say. And because you know nothing, because you're a very fat man. And fat men say nothing when they come into my gymnasium.
And how long has the gymnasium part been going on?
It's been going on since about January 1st.
Uh-huh.
We opened in January. And she's filled. She's so good. Mina is such a good physical therapist. People have found her, and she's a miracle worker.
Oh, and she takes clients. I mean, you're not.
This
is not a concierge.
No.
Therapist.
I wish it was a concierge arrangement, but
it
is simply she takes one at a time, works with you one at a time, and it's Mina Truong herself is life-threatening to me because she works for me so incredibly hard.
I wish you the best.
Thank you very much.
Right. Pain is a universal language, I think, understood everywhere.
Believe me.
You have recently, with the University of South Carolina Press, taken up editing a series of novels. And obviously, we're really going to talk about that series and especially Katherine's novel. But I want to talk to you about one of your books that I like. Maybe, well, the best of the nonfiction, absolutely, and very near the top, is your book on the books in your life.
My reading life, right.
Your reading life. There are writers who profess that they read nothing. Erskine Caldwell was the most famous one. He professed that he never read, and that no writer could read because if you were a writer, you didn't have any time for that. Hemingway read every afternoon when he was home. but no one has read as rigorously as you. You have written that you tried to read 200 pages a day?
Yeah, I had a teacher, English teacher in high school named Joseph Monty, who was one of those brilliant teachers, and I've had a lot of them. I've been lucky with my English teachers. And English teachers to me were simply life changers. They were the bearers of fire. I was thunderstruck by their gifts. I have thanked them a million times, but I could not believe. And Mr. Monty said, what a shame none of you read 200 pages a day, then perhaps we could begin a conversation. And I was 15 in his class, and there was this magnificent guy, and I wanted to be just like him. And he had such a powerful association with books, such a vast knowledge of literature. He made me want to be just like that. And the next teacher the next year, Jean Nora. The next teacher the next year, Millen Ellis. These Southern men of letters and distinction, and they made the classroom magical. Yeah. They made it absolutely, and they made books the thing. Wow. These imaginary bursts of artillery that opened up my whole world.
Yeah.
I just went crazy.
It did. I mean, your life has got to be one of the most public lives in American letters, no two ways. And about to be more public as well. But
horrible. It's horrible. I made a terrible mistake in my life.
Reading through that book, the book about books, I wasn't surprised at all about your love for story, the absolute centrality of, if you can't tell a good story, forget it. And I wasn't surprised that you loved Gone with the Wind. Yes. Because of the story. Right. And because of your mother. I'll tell you where I was delighted and surprised was with Thomas Wolfe and Look Homeward Angel. Your defense of Look Homeward Angel in these times is eccentric. You know that, or you don't know that?
Oh yes, I never. My editor thought my defense of Gone with the Wind was suicidal for my career, but it's. I read these books, and the one thing that these great English teachers I had, and you've been one your whole life, Don, and you know this, is, I was taught from the beginning, open myself up. Right. Do not let someone else form your opinion for you. And, Thomas Wolfe, I read him when I was 15 years old. I'd never read a book like, and it was very close to me, very personal to me. They had this young boy growing up in the South. And I thought, and my mother thought after she read it, this kid was getting beat up by his father. And it was too early to tell American readers that there was abuse in families. So Wolfe could not quite do that, I don't think. Mm-hmm. And it was just later on that it happened, but also, that magical sweep of language. Is, when he is not good, when he lets language just flower out of him, these orchids of prose that don't make any sense, that I think is part of when he's trying to pray, and he can't quite articulate what is inside of him, what's in his soul. So that as a kid caught me up. Yeah. And in the Gone with the Wind thing, it was simply the sheer narrative power that got me, that I had not read that book. I knew all my black friends would think I hated their guts because I liked that book, but I was not prepared for the sweep of that book and the characterizations in that book. No. And it got to me.
That book cannot be put down. It doesn't matter whether you think of it as first-rate literature or third-rate literature. In any case, you can't put it down. It's utterly readable.
The black writer, Pearl Clegg, she was asked about Gone with the Wind. She said when she read it, she loved it. And so they said, well, who'd you identify with the book? You're a black woman and a black writer. And she said, and she's cute as hell. She just said, Miss Scarlett, of course.
That book, with your work, there's always a tie-in. And with that book, it's explicitly to your mother. That was your mother's book, Gone with the Wind.
It was a book. My mother simply said, this is the greatest book ever written.
Yeah.
She read it to me when I was 5 years old. And she was adamant. And Mom didn't go to college. And I don't know if she graduated from high school, but she read as much as anybody I've ever met in my life. I'm not sure my father ever read any book, including my own. I don't know if he read the book I wrote about him. I just have no idea, Don. But Mom, you know, she put that in me, and Gone with the Wind. I used to visit Margaret Mitchell's grave in Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta, and my mother and I would kneel down to say a rosary when I was 4 years old.
Oh.
And that's how powerful her connection was. Mom found this out, that I was baptized at the same baptismal font as Margaret Mitchell.
Oh.
My mother changed her name from Frances Dorothy to Frances Margaret because of her adoration for Margaret Mitchell.
The great storyteller. Now you have entirely, this is like elective surgery, you have decided to become a series editor at the University of South Carolina Press for a series of Southern novels, Story River. I got that right, didn't I? River.
You got the whole thing
Story
right.
River, not because I always want to say River Story, but it's Story River. Why did you do it? When you are looking at these manuscripts, what are you looking for? What are the ones that you're choosing? And also, just to throw in, are you copy editing? Are you editing?
No,
or are you just choosing?
I am capable of copy editing. You know, here is my role in this. Okay, first of all, becoming editor at large at Story River Press has been one of the great mistakes I've made with my literary life, because I did not realize it would take so much time. For instance, Katherine. You know, I'm doing this week, I'm simply devoting my life to the career of Katherine Clark. And the reason I took it is there is a genius that has taken over at the University of South Carolina Press, and nobody knows it. And his name is Jonathan Haupt. He will be a famous editor someday.
Okay.
And I've had Nan Talese as an editor. I've had Jonathan Galassi as an editor. There was Nan was the first recipient of the first Maxwell Perkins Award for Lifetime Achievement in Editing. Jonathan, I think, was the fourth. And I know great editors. And Jonathan Haupt, who is now editor, gotten me in on this, is a great editor in that particular series of great editors that came out of New York. But he grew up a little bit poor, went to the University of Tennessee at Martin, then went to Southern Illinois for a master's in marketing, and he remained in the background. And Katherine will tell you when you interview her that he is superb, and I think a genius.
Well, how many books are there going to be, do you imagine? How many per year? What is your plan?
We started this, we started printing, was it last year, Katherine?
Right.
And I think we've done 12 novels now. With yours coming out this week,
Right.
Katherine?
Last week.
Right.
We've done 12 novels. I think we have 24 under contract, and they keep coming in. They're flying in.
Right.
Because as you know, Don, there's a need for people to have an outlet that is a new possibility.
And it isn't always going to be New York anymore.
No.
It is.
No.
The situation has become perilous. You can't get an agent. You can't get a publisher. It's a mess. This is shameless, but I'm going to do it anyway.
You've always been like
Thomas
this.
Wolfe novel, You Can't Go Home Again. Watch this, Katherine.
Okay.
When the people of Mountain Brook read your novel, The Headmaster's Darlings. What you held nothing back. This is a novel set in what was your high school, the prep
Right.
school, the Altamont School,
Right.
and it is an 18th century satire of the mores, the habits, the values of people in Mountain Brook. What are you expecting? What are you expecting to hear from those victims of yours?
Well, hopefully no one will come at me with an assault rifle.
Not in Mountain. Well, I don't know. They have hunting rifles in Mountain Brook, but
I hope they'll laugh. because I wanted it to be a funny book.
It is. One of the things that I've been told by writers especially writers of satire or sarcasm, is that the target, the actual target, never seems to recognize himself.
It's always the woman down the street or the family, right, in another neighborhood.
Right.
Right.
The pompous person thinks it's somebody else.
Right. Right.
Your protagonist is who's real. I mean, you have a picture of him.
Right.
In the front, it's a frontispiece, and there's a photo of Hames in your novel.
That's right.
So it's modeled after him.
The main character is completely modeled after him.
Right.
But the other thing is that most of my other characters, I would say, are composites.
Oh,
they're
yes.
not. They're not taken directly from life like I did with the main character.
He is in the first. There are 4 novels, and they're all finished, right? They're all
Right. They're all done.
And they will
We've
come out.
bought them all.
Good. And they'll come out one a year.
One every 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All the
It's
better.
called series publication, where you don't make the reader wait for a year or two between books. You go ahead and...
Why not?
That's right.
You've written them.
That's right.
This this fellow is huge.
Right.
How much does he weigh? It never says, how much he weighs.
There was an argument.
There's
at
an
dinner
argument about
last
that.
night.
It's a controversial question because I remember him being much fatter than 400 pounds, and that's what everybody is saying, that he weighed at his fattest before the bypass, and I just have to differ from that because I know plenty of people who weigh close to that, and he was much more huge. But that's the reason I did not put a number in the novel. To let
Well, you don't.
right.
You keep
She told
saying-
me he weighed 600
Yes,
pounds.
I had
Okay.
that number originally, and it
Right.
was questioned so often, and it became a stumbling block for so many people and a sticking point that I finally just took the number out altogether
right.
and allow the reader's imagination to fill in.
Also, you put in bits of dialogue where people in the novel are saying to one another, "How much you think he weighs?" Here is a man he's teaching in the Altamont School, which is called the
Brookhaven.
School. He's teaching. Almost all the students are well-to-do,
Right.
prosperous, privileged children.
Right.
But his goal is to civilize the barbarians.
Right. Right.
Now, the barbarians in Mountain Brook are surgeons and bankers and lawyers and stockbrokers. They
Right.
don't think of themselves as barbarians.
Right.
I'd like, for purposes, no one's read your book yet.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
What does Norman Laney mean when he says that these very well-educated rich people who think of themselves as cultured are actually barbarians?
Well, his definition of barbarian was as big as he was, okay?
Yeah.
If you were a student in his class and you were gum chewing and blowing bubbles, he would be likely to call you a barbarian. Also, if you had millions of dollars in your bank account and you did not have books on your bookshelves or good art in your home, you were a barbarian.
And he was going to civilize.
He was going to show the people of Mountain Brook the way to spend that money. And
But you can't save the lawyers and the doctors and the bankers, but you can save their children. His goal was to identify the most promising and then get them to leave Alabama,
Right.
at least for a while,
Right.
and preferably go to the Ivy League. Now, one of those went to Harvard. That's you, by the way.
well, I'm kind of an offstage character in this first one.
Uh-huh.
but yes, that was his goal. He noticed that the people in Birmingham, in Alabama, really did not leave Alabama for college.
Right.
Not at that time.
They
came
here.
That's right. They came to Bama.
And Norman Laney doesn't think much of that.
Well, what he thought that if you went from Mountain Brook to Bama, particularly if you went to a sorority or fraternity, you stayed in that Mountain Brook bubble.
Right.
And he wanted to get his students out of the bubble, and then have them come back in and bring the outside world back with them.
And that is a bubble, I mean, in a kind of science fiction sense. It repels
anything from the outside.
What is it? There's a line that repeats itself in this novel. Anyone not from here is an outsider. All
Right.
outsiders are Yankees.
Right.
All Yankees are Jews.
Right. So you're doomed.
So you could be a Presbyterian from Seattle,
Right.
but as far as the people in Mountain Brook are concerned, you're a Yankee,
You're a
Jew.
Yankee. Yeah.
Which is a very limited way of looking at the world.
Right. But the novel is set in the 80s. 84, 83, 84.
Yeah.
And part of what I wanted to do with the series was to show how the community does change over time, how it evolves, and how teachers like him and schools like Brookhaven are the agents of change.
Well, let me ask you that. From novel 1 to the end of novel 4, how many years pass?
Well, novel 4 is 1997.
Ah.
So
I had no way of knowing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My intention is to keep going and bring it up to the present day.
Oh.
If I have enough in me.
Catherine?
Yes.
Your Norman Laney spends an immense amount of his energy convincing these Altamont, these high school seniors to get out of Alabama,
Right.
to go elsewhere to school, Ivy League if possible, but other places would be good too. He would settle for Stanford or University of Chicago or whatever if it's necessary. But this is not necessarily that they are escaping.
Right.
He advises, he urges them to come back a little, to come back at least for a while,
Right.
and maybe help to make the home place a little better. Is that?
Absolutely.
Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. He thought the best way to bring the outside world into a hermetically sealed cocoon like Mountain Brook was to send people out and have them come back and bring the outside world with them when they came back. But he did want us to go away, but he didn't want us to turn our backs on our communities.
Right. Pat, you live, well, you were, what was it you always used to say? You were raised in the archipelago of the United States Marine Corps bases.
No question. I was in the gulag in my entire childhood.
But you chose
Well,
here, South Carolina.
Fate in the Marine Corps, it's different for me as a military brat than for most. The Army and the Air Force, they send their kids and their officers and their gentlemen and their enlisted men and women, they send them to Germany and they send them to Japan. The Marines don't take their families. They have to hit the beach, be ready to hit the beach. They don't need a wife, they don't need kids. So we are all put in southern swamps. You know, we are in Quantico, Virginia.
Yeah.
We're in Cherry Point, North Carolina. We're in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. We are in Parris Island, Beaufort Air Station. We are in the swamplands. And so as our brothers and sisters from the Army and the Air Force speak many languages, we all have these, you know, sort of distant, weird southern accents. Simply because we never get to go anywhere and we never get near a school like Altamont's.
Did you ever have a temptation to spend your life in New York or Boston or
No,
Chicago?
not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
We're talking about Norman Laney, your protagonist, who urges these people to leave and be educated elsewhere, have experiences out in the great world. He also urges them to come back, which makes good sense. Mm-hmm. But I think where my jaw dropped was there are a couple young women. He says, when you come back, join the junior league. We can only change it from within.
That's right. That's right. That's what he believed.
What does
Right.
he imagine the Junior League should be like?
Well, it's designed to be an organization that does good works in the community, and I think he felt like there were a lot of good works that needed to be done in Birmingham, and if Mountain Brook women who needed something to do would turn those good works into Birmingham, it would work. There's a line in the book where he says nobody likes a carpetbagger. So
yes.
he doesn't think that change happens by outsiders coming in and forcing change.
Yes.
That change happens from within. It happens by the people who live in a community.
Yeah.
So they need to join and belong to the institutions that are in their community and use those institutions.
He is a fifth columnist. He is a spy behind enemy lines, this man. And once in a while, even he seems to understand that he has interfered, or he has guided the personal lives of his students to a rather excessive degree. There's one young man who is meant to be gay.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, that's a case where a young person came to him and presented a problem. What for this young man was a problem at the time, just laid it on his desk. And there are any number of approaches that a teacher or counselor can take when that happens.
What time? What period are we talking about?
This is the 1980s.
Got it.
So, but he decides to help this young man learn how to accept who he is and to become who he is instead of running from it or camouflaging it. And there's an analogy between his own fatness and anything else in someone else's life that they're having trouble coming to terms with or trouble dealing with.
One must accept oneself and use it rather than
deny it or
run
away from it. Right. Even if it's problematic in the society. Yeah.
Well, your man is an English teacher.
Yes.
But oddly enough, and in spite of our conversation about the all-important English teachers of the world, he does not pride himself so much on the teaching of literature as he does his courses in art history.
Right.
And he apparently has fantastic taste himself. There is a scene at his apartment. By the way, I love the description of the apartment house.
Oh, good.
The apartment house in a community which is all mansions. The apartment house is the place of the newlywed and the nearly dead. Right?
That's an old phrase
It
in
is.
Mountain Brook. I did not make that up by any stretch.
I love that.
Yeah,
but he can't afford to buy a mansion.
Right.
Or can he? They have this meeting at his house, and on the walls of his apartment,
Right,
on
right.
the walls of his apartment are these paintings.
Yes.
And one of them is worth $1 million.
Are you asking me if he really had such a painting?
Well, no. I mean, it almost everything in this book, I swallowed it right up. but that particular moment, I thought, whoa, now, really?
He told us a story about going to New York in the 60s, I believe it was, when he was a college student, and he had a certain amount of money for the whole week.
Yes.
To spend in New York, and he went visiting the art galleries. And to be honest, I do not remember exactly which artist it was. I think it was Jasper Johns.
It was Jasper
Johns. Well, I know I put that in the book, but
No, it was sold at auction from the book. Mrs. Foster.
But the artist was unknown at that time. Was not a big name, but he with his eye for art, he could see the merits in the painting and or drawing, and pulled out all the money that he had for that week in New York and bought this piece.
And the Jasper Johns connection, did you put it in the book because
No,
Pat
no.
Conroy was a
No.
distant relative of Jasper Johns? You were.
I didn't know it until my brother Mike got married. He married this wonderful girl named Jean, who is a Sheely, and Sheely means Smith in Lexington, South Carolina. And I mean, there's more Sheelys.
Yeah.
Sheely's barbecue, Sheely's used car, Sheely this, Sheely bowling alley, Sheely that. And anyway, she told her mother came out to me during the wedding at the smallest Baptist church in America, in the wilds of South Carolina. And as I'm sitting there and I'm doing something, and Miss Sheely comes up to me and says, "You ain't the only big shot in this family." So I looked down at her. I just had met her a couple minutes ago, and I said, "What you got?" And she said, "How does Jasper Johns sound?" And I said, "Jasper Johns is a member of this family." And it looked like a scene out of Deliverance, and the banjo playing scene in Deliverance. I said, "This is where Jasper Johns came." He not only is a genius, he must have run out of this town with his hair on fire. I mean, this was it. But they had raised Jasper John up, and his mother had taken off for a while. And Jasper Johns was taken in by the family Sheely and raised there. And my sister-in-law, grew up knowing him. And I mean, he was just simply part of the family, cousin Jasper.
Well, he failed to return and give back, however.
I wanted to look in their attic to see if there's any coloring books that he left behind.
Well, there's a wonderful conversation, and we could. It's not a murder mystery, but one doesn't want to give too much away. But there's a wonderful conversation between a bright young man and your man Norman, and the kid says, as I would say, "Why don't you sell this painting and buy a house?" And your man says,
"I would rather live in my small apartment with my art on my walls than to live in a big house without my art on the walls."
And that is a civilized.
That was his definition of being civilized. Right. Art first. Yes.
I'd much rather live in a big house.
All the art on the walls except just that one. Pat, the first time that you and I think actually the day that we met for the first time, were introduced. We sat down. We did a bit of an interview. You had just published The Prince of Tides. The great Santini was well in the past at that one, a few years earlier. And I don't know why I said this, but I wanted to reassure you that I did not need to harp upon your father. And I said, you won't remember this because you do 1,000 of these, but I said, don't worry, I'm not here to have you talk some more about your father. And you said, "My father? Let me tell you about my father." And then you spoke for 10 minutes about the great Santini, even though I never meant it, and what I had meant was entirely to talk about The Prince of Tides. But since the last time you and I spoke, you have written The Death of Santini, in which you promise that that's your last book about your father. It is. I want to talk about this for a few minutes. That book is such a bittersweet, such a sad and funny book, almost alternating pages. To get the sad over with, the word hate appears in that book. 2 or 3 different times. You talk about your dad, and I thought, that's tough. But you did. No,
I grew up. I hated him when I was in a high chair. And, I remember this. I think it was my first thought. My father was beating my mother in a kitchen when she was trying to stab him with a butcher knife. That's the first thought I had on earth. And it was like, welcome to Earth, kid. This is what it's going to be like. And I remember my crying and my face flaming, and I told Lucy, your cousin, last night, I said, what I was feeling, I couldn't talk yet, but I was feeling hate.
Oh.
I was feeling something coming out of me, and it was hate.
No
And I
language
grew up
for it
hating
yet.
my father. I mean, I didn't like guys that beat me up, beat my mother up, beat my brothers and sisters up, kicked the dog. I didn't like guys like that. And he was terrifying, Don. You know, Colonel Conroy was a terrifying, large, imposing, and cruel man.
Was he physically a large man?
Oh, 6'4".
Was he?
220, 225. He was a basketball player in the Hall of Fame in his college. Great athlete, but tough. And being tough is one thing. Why be tough about with Peg Conroy?
No. You know why? You do know why I think he's not a huge man. Was not a huge man. It's Robert Duvall.
That's right.
That's why I didn't think he was a large man.
Of course. And Dad saw him. I took Dad to the movie set, and I explained to Dad, I said, Dad, you have to get used to things. You hadn't said this, and, we didn't do this. And, I was trying to get prepared, Dad. And we go to the set, and he sees Robert Duvall and Michael O'Keefe playing a basketball game. So I said, what do you think so far? And he said, and Dad was, he said, they got a midget to play me, son. He said, and I said, Daddy, look 50 feet high on the screen. You have to worry about a thing. And then he looks, and he's troubled. And I said, what's wrong, Dad? He said, they can't play ball, son. They play like Hollywood fruitcakes. Why don't they let you and I out on the court? And he looks at me and says, I can still take you.
It never quit.
He can't,
No.
he never could, never would.
Ken Kesey had the same opinion about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as your dad had about Robert Duvall. Kesey wanted Randall Patrick McMurphy to be the big man that he was in the novel, and it was Jack Nicholson, who's not a particularly big man, but the world thinks that Randall Patrick McMurphy is 5'7" or whatever. But that's just too bad. That's Hollywood. I was looking over some materials recently, and I cannot tell you how many writers I have spoken to whose dream is to get that novel on the screen. Writers with 5 novels, 10 novels. You have The Water is Wide, and The Lords of Discipline, and The Great Santini, and Prince of Tides. It's just been you've had an amazing run there.
It's been a matter of luck. Like, I think the Headmaster's Darlings would be a great novel.
That's what I'm asking.
I would love to see my wife, Cassandra King's book, The Sunday Wife. And I do not understand, except for this, it has changed since I was a young writer, that they wanted stories, and they wanted family, and they wanted, they liked the South. And now they want these Batman, and they want
the comic books,
and they want the comic books,
right,
and they want what they want is a blockbuster. They want that great selling thing that they don't quite seem to be able to find in the American novel, but it'll come again. That's it's all cyclical in Hollywood.
Right. If you can just hang on. I had a conversation with Lee Smith not long ago. She has yet to have a movie made of a novel. Me. They've all been optioned over and over. They make it through through various stages and ceremonies, but none has yet got on the screen. Your dad, whatever he thought about your books, whether he read them or not, I love that story about him sitting down next to you at signings. What did he think he was doing?
Dad was not a modest man, and it just came up accidentally. He was furious when The Great Santini came out, as all of Katherine's relatives are soon going to be when they read her book.
I think some are.
And I mean, no, they will not talk. This will be her last time, probably in Alabama. But I was, a rookie at this, and Dad had gone crazy. My mother had gone crazy. Their families had gone crazy, and nobody was talking to me. And Dad gets this thing of, he had this strange Marine Corps loyalty. So in Rich's in Atlanta, I see him. He's down by the. He's looking at dishes. Way down, not with the bookstore. I said, Dad, what are you changing China patterns? And I said, come up here. And so people wanted to meet him. He sat down. And somebody asked him to sign a book, and it changed his life. And it just changed his life. He says, so and so. I hope you enjoy my son's work of fiction, and he underlines fiction. And he signed to Don Conroy, Colonel, USMC, lovable, likable. And he did that. He did every book I wrote for years. He would sit beside, and his favorite moment was when he'd look at the line, look at his, look at mine, he'd say, my line's longer. So it was just one of those things that I did not plan for that became sort of one of the things that got us back together.
There's a line that you've used in more than one place. I'll add this in this book, but it's, what is it he said? I am the source, or I'm the seed, or something like that.
What right do you have to sit here, Dad? You didn't write this book. I did. I am the source, son. I am the seed bank. I am the seed. It just sounded. I said, Dad, it sounds disgusting. I mean, but he simply thought he had given me whatever talent I had because he was my father, and that he deserved to sit down there. And he said, and my wife Cassandra King, sure. Her ex-husband Donnelly, hooray, King. We got a book signed from both of us, and I don't know if Sandra and I had started dating, but Donnelly reported back to Sandra that he didn't like me much. I was not a gentleman or very nice, but that my father was a perfect Southern gentleman. And
when you and he had considerably reconciled, and you were meeting on a regular basis, I giggled. I sat in my living room and giggled when I read the chapter, the part about him stealing your mail. He would go through, and later you learned that he had taken some, 2 or 3 pieces of mail that you really wanted.
One was a letter from Barbara Streisand asking me something about the script in the presentation. I don't read this till 5 years later. And and Barbara was irritated with me about something. I had no idea what it was. Then later, Martin Scorsese had written a letter asking me to do a screenplay with it. I didn't see that until I found him in Dad's archives after he died. So I'm getting, and what they did is my sister Kathy was in on this. They would steal all the great mail, and Dad had this thing called the ARCs, the archives, and he would get it because he knew, I didn't want to give him this stuff, so he just would steal it before I got it, and if he liked it, and Kathy told me he would come in with, he said the ARCs were great today, and he'd have stuff coming out of his pockets from everywhere, and he'd have packages that somebody had sent me, and when I asked him about it, he felt no guilt at all. I said, son, you don't keep things well enough. I said, Dad, at least I'd like to know I got them.
I know. You're supposed to take it after he's read it. To end your memoir of your dad, it ends, and I think this is the last thing to say, is that he loved you in his own way, and that's your conclusion. Your book ends with love.
Dad loved me in his own way. I think the way Genghis Khan loves his subjects, and the way Midas loved gold, and the way different villains in history loved, the way Nero loved Rome. Yes, I finally came convinced Dad did love me and the kids and Mom.
Yeah. as he
in his
he
own
understood
way.
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you have books, but now you're doing a book together.
Yes.
You're doing, Katherine, you had Mother Wit,
Right.
an As Told To biography by an Alabama black midwife,
Right.
and then you had Milking the Moon, do you call, what did you, we
I don't
called that
even-
by Eugene Walter, As Told To? Is that
Right.
what you did?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Now there's going to be a book, your life story as told to Katherine. Why did you decide to do it at all, and why did you choose Katherine?
It was victory of human vanity over human modesty. And I've regretted it 1,000 times. It was a moment of complete weakness. But it is also, I love Milking the Moon so
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
I mean, I had simply gone crazy over that. I'd met Eugene Walter on several occasions, adored him.
Yeah.
And so, there was something about me that when, I met Katherine, we got along. She introduced me. We were somewhere and she introduced me. She seemed to like my writing. And I'm always paranoid, if people like my writing or don't. You're a writer, you never know. And so, we agreed doing it. If I had known she was going to ask me such personal questions over such a long period of time, I would not have done it. But she's asked me things about my modest and barely existent sex life over the years, which has unnerved me more than I can tell.
Is this true?
Would I do a
Is this
thing
true?
like that?
Did you ask Eugene about his sex life?
Never. Never. I knew better than to do that.
How long have you been at this?
We started last year. We did our first taping or recording sessions in person when Pat came to stay at my house for a week.
Are you doing it all orally, or is
All-
any of it
all
on no
orally.
emails, no letters, all on tape?
All is
So
going to be
it's
his
there's no tape, but yes.
his speaking voice.
Yes.
And because the logistics did not work out for us to be together, we decided to try doing it over the phone.
Oh, and is that working for you?
It worked.
Right.
We did it last summer, every day for an hour on the phone.
Wow.
Right.
It was a nightmare.
That's a lot. And are you holding back?
I told Katherine I would tell her everything she asked. This would I try to answer it as honestly as I possibly could. That it was open season. That I had tried to do my writing life the same way. And so that's what I told her. That she was going to become so grotesquely personal, I had no idea about. But that's what she did.
A mutual friend of ours, Jake, was telling me that you were actually taping at the store up there.
We did. We
while
did.
you were in conversation with people. Is that right?
Well, I want to get those. You need a lot of moments that are not formal interviews.
right,
You
right.
need to get somebody's off-the-cuff remarks and their personality when they're having downtime.
Well, the last time you had to transcribe those recordings, and I'm sure it took 1,000,000 hours. So you're working away. You've been working away a couple of years. When you're finished, I would love. I'll read it.
We'll be back.
and I'd love to hear the two of you talking about it. When do you think that will be?
Well, I've just finished the rough draft, actually. Yes,
you're
I am
very
very
well
far
along.
along. Thanks to the University of South Carolina
Right.
Library. Very far along. So hopefully it will come out in the next year. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. And don't worry, Pat, you couldn't have had very many secrets left.
No, they have all been bared to the world. My soul, I dreaded hearing her voice each morning. It's something hideous and obsequious, something I did that I regretted my entire life. She would have me talk about it for hours.
Well, people do know you have made it possible. People do know your life. But I'm looking forward to the book. thank you both so much. This has been a wonderful chat.
Thank you,
What a
John.
delight, Don.
Yes,
Always.
thank you.